Banishers Ghosts of New Eden has been out for a couple of months, which means it's time to sit down and give my full review of the game. My name is James, and I started this channel simply because I love video games. If that sounds like you, please subscribe to my channel so that you can watch more videos just like this one. Let's get started. Banishers Ghosts of New Eden is a third-person action RPG developed by Don't Nod and published by Focus Entertainment. The game takes place in and around the town of New Eden in 1695. You play as Banishers Red McWraith and Antea Duarte, who come to New Eden to assist in the banishment of a nightmare. Throughout the game, you must learn about the inhabitants of New Eden and learn their backstories to uncover the origin of the nightmare. Gameplay mainly consists of investigations and is supported by exploration and combat. I feel like what they were really trying to focus on was the investigations, and that's something that I feel like they did really well. Some other boring stuff real quick. I played it on PS5, and I think I kept most of the settings on their default, pretty much across the board. And then when I started the game on the normal difficulty. What the game does very well is the investigations. I found the investigations to be both fun and intriguing. The early game investigation, the first couple hours, they're quick and to the point to show you that not every investigation is going to be the exact same, and that sometimes the solution will be kind of obvious to you, but then sometimes you'll have to work for it a little bit more. And I really enjoy the way you go and uncover different kinds of different pieces of information, whether it's reading the information in a book or finding somebody's journal or finding tracks that match a certain person's shoes or something like that. Everything that you can think of like that is incorporated in this game, and I really enjoyed that. Another thing that I really enjoyed was that while you're doing your investigations, everybody feels like they were designed for this game. And if I remember correctly, pretty much everybody in the entire town kind of plays into the overarching story, which, going back to the investigations, there's main investigations that you have to do to be able to advance the story, but there's also lots of support investigations. And you might meet somebody early in the game and think they're just kind of like a basic throwaway NPC, but then later you find out that they're actually completely entangled with something else that's been going on in a different part of town. And I loved the way that all of the stories were interconnected, and I generally found the character interactions to be enjoyable and believable. Another thing that I thought the game did pretty well was exploration. The world feels large and open, but confined enough that I knew where I needed to go, and I didn't lose focus on what my missions were. Moving into the mixed category, the most mixed thing for me was the combat in this game. The combat was pretty boring to me in the beginning of the game, but I did find the combat to be a lot more fulfilling once you having a wider arsenal of different attacks and weapons that you can do. But it was kind of stale in the beginning of the game, which is why it's here in the mixed category. Next, the pacing of the game is all over the place. In the beginning of the game, you're being kind of fed these investigations in like rapid fire that like each investigation would probably take you like 25, 30 minutes in the opening part of the game. And then during that same section, the areas that you're exploring are very like narrow, like you're going down these like corridors, and so everything seems very streamlined. And so for the first few hours that I was playing this game, I was thinking that this was going to be a really quick and tight experience. And then once you get maybe a third of the way through the game, one of the main investigations is very long. It probably took it's long, and it's going on at the same time as another long investigation. And where before the investigations were all kind of kept in specific areas, this one is kind of spread out between like two distant parts of the map. So you're also spending a lot of time just moving between the different areas, and it really killed the momentum for me. And then after that, the game kind of opens up. It presents you with like 20 optional investigations and like a whole bunch of side content. And I think it could have been a little bit better if they had introduced some of the side content and the side investigations to you more gradually. And then at the end of the game, there's a section in the story where something becomes kind of urgent, and so you want to kind of get through the story stuff kind of quickly, so then it starts speeding up again. But the middle section of the game, the pacing is very inconsistent throughout, and so it felt pretty uneven to me. Another thing in the mixed category for me is that the choices and consequences are kind of thrown in your face. And what I mean by that is that when you're presented, so after an investigation, you are presented with a choice like, do you want to blame person A for this whole thing and then basically have them like put to death? Or do you want to help the ghost cross over into the afterlife? Or do you want to like banish the ghost and send them down to hell or something? Which I think it's great that it lets you choose that stuff. However, when you even highlight one of the choices, every single time, every single investigation, you as you move your cursor, it pops up in big letters and it says, this will make this happen at the end of the game, basically. It removes some of the mystery of the choice and consequence, because I went into the end of the game knowing exactly pretty much what ending I was going to get. As a role-playing experience, that kind of lessened it for me. And another thing that's mixed for me is that a lot of the investigations are kind of solved for you. If you find the right clue, then your character will just say out loud, like, oh, that means this is happening, and it doesn't let you figure that stuff out for yourself. In the story, the required missions to progress the game, I think they should probably kind of hold your hand during those a little bit, but during the side investigations, like the more optional ones, I would have liked to have seen something where it's like you as the player are presented with a bunch of information and that you have to kind of sort through that stuff and kind of figure it out yourself. But that's not really a huge issue for me, more of like a nitpick, which is why this is in the mixed category. The last thing that I have written down under mixed is just the I wrote performance and visuals, but I think it's mostly just the performance. There were a few times in the game that I noticed it where it was noticeably bad, and it wasn't like it wasn't even like for a stretch of gameplay or anything like that. It was typically a slowdown for like a second or something, usually in combat, but not during like boss battles or anything, usually when like lots of stuff would be happening on screen at a time. And I also think that the visuals were good enough that I would even probably go as far to say that games don't really need to look much better than this. They can actually probably look much worse than this, and I would still enjoy them. And unfortunately, that brings us to the negative. There's really not a whole lot that I want to touch on here, but I do think it is worth discussing. First thing, biggest negative, the one that I noticed the most was difficulty spikes and leveling. That so before the game had even opened up, so when I was still in the kind of like tight corridors in the first third of the game, you would come across like a group of enemies, and I would feel like, okay, I'm at the appropriate level because this group of enemies is at the same level as me, and it's not super easy to defeat them, but it's also not difficult to defeat them. And then I just keep going down the same corridor, and it's like, oh, here's a big enemy, and he's labeled as level 12. And so I found that a little bit frustrating. It was like, was I supposed to be like level like 11 or 12 at this point in order to defeat that bigger, like stronger enemy? Or was this bigger, stronger enemy just supposed to like kick my butt for a little bit? And so that was a little bit frustrating and kind of like confusing to me, and it made me feel like I was playing the game wrong. The next thing that I have written down is gear upgrades. That this is kind of hard to explain what exactly I got frustrated by. Overall, I found the gear upgrading, gear management, gear comparing, everything related to gear in this game, I found it to be pretty bad. And the last negative that I have is kind of a me problem, but also not really a me problem because I felt like I was doing everything I could. Anyway, it's that you can fail rituals. So when you'll throughout the game, you'll perform a ritual to make something happen, and doing a specific ritual it'll require certain materials. If you go up to a ritual spot and you do the wrong ritual, you still lose those materials, and materials that I didn't always know where to get anyway. And so it might sound like it's really dumb, but I found that the language that the characters would use to describe which rituals they're doing was too similar. I realized that pretty early on, and I was like, okay, I need to pay attention to this. And the whole game, I was trying to pay attention to it, and I was constantly doing it wrong up until the very end. And that's everything that I think about Banishers Ghost of New Eden. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the game. And until next time, the best way to keep up with me is on Twitter and on Instagram at James_Solar. Thanks, guys.